So here we go. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us at the 2027 Virginia Horse Industry Board Grant webinar. My name is Jennifer Reichert. I'm the Virginia Horse Industry Board Grants and Budget Manager. We'll be giving the same session on July 6th. So if you've missed it today and you're watching the recording, feel free to come back and join us at that time. Our YouTube channel, for those of you who are listening, is at virginiahorseindustryboard.com. So the Virginia Horse Industry Board Chair is Sharon Molster, and the Program Manager is Garrett Petro. And they are unable to join us today, but we do have with us the Executive Director, Ms. Emily Day. So it is our pleasure to welcome you to this conversation. I see some familiar faces and names, and also I'm excited to see some that I don't know yet. So with that, let's get started. And I'll talk to you first about what we're gonna about who is the Virginia Horse Industry Board so that you know who this body is. We'll talk about the Virginia Horse Industry Board's 2027 grant program, dive into the application process, the budget categories in a little bit of detail, and give you a future look at what implementation would look like. I hope to get through that in about 30 minutes, give or take, and then we'll end with Q&A, although you are welcome to use the chat to drop questions in, and Emily may be able to answer those as we go, or they may be worth making a quick pause. So the Horse Industry Board is one of the agricultural commodity boards in the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It was created in 1994 by a combination of legislation and a statewide referendum. Its meetings are public. They're at least quarterly and right now monthly. And as noted, they are supported by myself, Executive Director Emily Day, and Program Manager at VDAX, Garrett Petro. There are 12 members of the Virginia Horse Industry Board. These members represent the horse industry, its support services, education, and equine health. These are the folks who will be deciding on your application and proposals. Four of them are presidents of specific industry organizations. You can see their names and their associations on your screen. Six of them are appointed by the governor. Four of those six are appointed at large from recommendations by the remaining statewide horse breed or use organizations. One is to represent support services such as feed sales, pharmaceutical sales, veterinary services, or the like. One is to be an individual commercially involved in the horse industry, such as a manager or trainer. These appointees serve 4-year terms and can serve up to 2 consecutive terms. In addition, the equine extension specialist from Virginia Tech is on the board, as is the Commissioner of Agriculture, who serves in a non-voting capacity. Many of these board members are new in the past 12 or 18 months. The same law that created and composed the Virginia Horse Industry Board gave it the responsibility for the promotion and economic development of the equine industry in the Commonwealth, and specifically authorized the board to do these 7 things and to execute contracts and agreements, such as grants, in order to accomplish these goals. Everything they do needs to fit within these guidelines. So that is, they can produce economic reports, develop a directory, fund educational programs and research, engage in media liaison, collect, analyze, and disseminate horse industry related data. They do that by spending the Virginia Horse Industry Promotion and Development Fund. That has 3 sources, each of them with their legal citations that you can see on your screen. The $1.50 per Coggins test, which is collected by the state veterinarian, 75 cents per 50-pound bag or $3 per ton of manufactured feed for sale in Virginia. And thirdly, funds generated by the horse racing industry. This gets a little complicated, but it's roughly 25 1,000ths or up to 5 100ths. So that is up to a nickel per $100 of the amount that is retained by the licensees on horse racing conducted in Virginia. And this is collected via the Virginia Racing Commission. So with that introduction, let's move to this year's grant program, which is different than previous years. If you are familiar with last year's program, which was different than the previous years, this is also different from that. Similar, but different. First, the board has made up to $1.25 million available for this grant program. That's big money. They're excited about it. They're looking to move the needle in the state on issues in the equine industry. Next, They have identified five specific strategic priorities that they want to spend that money on. I'll go through them. First, projects or collaborations to address industry-wide needs. Second, projects that engage multiple equine disciplines. Third, projects that increase participation in Virginia equine events and activity. And fourth, projects that promote equine breeding and development in Virginia. Fifth and finally, projects that recruit and retain youth equestrians. So these are the five strategic priorities that the board has allocated to its grant program this year. Another change this year is the identification of three specific mechanisms of how they want to achieve those priorities. If you're familiar with last year's program, it was we threw the doors wide open. Any grant was going to be considered. This year, they're a little more narrowly focused with three mechanisms. Strategic, focused on large projects that substantially move the industry. Grassroots projects, focused on local projects that advance the priorities locally with a maximum of $5,000 per grant, and event support grants that are for events that have impact on those strategic priorities as well as promotional impact. All of these must fall within the authorities that I mentioned before, 32-1703. Here they are again as a reminder. This is what the board is authorized by law to do. Everything it does must fit within these priorities. Oops. So let's talk about each of those grants one at a time. First is the strategic grants. For these grants, think big. The board wants to move the needle on some topics that are relevant to the horse industry across our whole state. Given the authorities that we've talked about on the prior slide, this may have to do with generating or sharing information, establishing an educational program. Research falls here. Think about what would increase participation, promote breeding and development. So as noted, large strategic projects that substantially advance the equine industry move the needle in some capacity. Collaboration is encouraged, especially across the board, but especially on strategic grants. Eligibility for strategic grants is any organization. Now note the asterisk and note the small print definition. So we have defined what we mean by an organization, and that is, I'll read it. Eligible organizations include public and private organizations as specified. That means by your grant category, whether nonprofit or for-profit that have an EIN number by the award date. So for example, that would include organizations, associations, localities, educational institutions, or other public or private entities or joint ventures. So for strategic grants, any organization is eligible. If you are an out-of-state, non-Virginia organization, you must be in a partnership with a Virginia organization for this grant. And then strategic grants will be evaluated on the impact on at least one of the priorities and the reasonability of your budget. So if your anticipated request is not for an event and is larger than $5,000 limit for the grassroots grant, your project will inherently fall into the strategic grants category. To be competitive, you'll want to make sure that you are thinking about the big picture in the state. Maybe join forces with some collaborators to address a shared barrier on something that would benefit multiple players. For grassroots grants, think local. These are well-defined projects that advance those same five priorities on a local scale with a $5,000 per grant limit. Eligibility for these is any Virginia organization. Note again the same definition of organization. And then evaluation, as always, impact on at least one of the priorities and budget reasonability. We expect this category to be very competitive. The board may make as few as 10 grassroots grants. So think about think carefully and make sure that you're well crafted and tied closely to the priorities. This category also, we recognize that we are offering less dollars, and so we are scaling what we're requesting from you to match, meaning that in the full proposal, we'll have slightly less burden on this, and also in implementation, it will be relatively simpler compared to current year and compared to the other grant categories. This year's third grant type are event support grants. Think about visibility. These are support for equine events that offer impact on the strategic priorities, those five priorities, as well as promotional impact. And eligibility is any organization holding an event in Virginia, same definition of organization. So it must be an event in Virginia. Evaluation here, same as the others, with the added wrinkle of we're looking for events that particularly elevate Virginia's or the horse board's profile. Things that we cannot fund. We cannot fund construction of any flavor. No physical infrastructure, capital investment, renovation, related supplies or materials. We cannot fund construction. Can't fund legislative or lobbying efforts. We are a state body. We can't lobby other state bodies. We cannot provide subgrants to groups that are not named in the proposal. So we can't give you money so you can do a grant program. We can't help you develop a new product or establish a new enterprise. And this is not a business development grant, so it's not for the benefit or profit of your business or firm. It's not to set up a new organization. It's not for fundraising, and it's we can't give cash prizes or gift cards. Things that are the same or similar to last year. So this is still, as last year, one cycle per year. So this is the only cycle that we will do for grants taking place during 2027. In the past, deeper past, it was quarterly. We have moved to an annual cycle. We have kept the two-stage process we moved to last time around. So we are currently in the pre-proposal stage where we're looking for concepts that will be, if invited, fleshed out in much more detail at the full proposal stage. Both the pre-proposal and the full proposal stage remain on Google Forms with similar evaluation criteria to last year. This is a state body, and so state government guidelines absolutely apply. That usually shows up when the money is involved. So the budgets are strictly in the things that we can and cannot fund and must be clearly demonstrated. But in addition, there are requirements for the records being open to the public. That is our records remain open to the public, and yours are auditable for 3 years after the grant has concluded. So 3 years starting in 2028. This grant is conducted on a reimbursement basis. That means that after you have paid for whatever it is that you've purchased, you can then ask us to reimburse you for that for that item that you already paid for. We have now moved to electronic only. We are no longer accepting paper forms of any description. Likewise, our reports also online, those continue to measure your accomplishments. That's not new. And the requirement for acknowledging the horse board support, also not new. We still continue to require just one point of contact for grant. I need one point of contact, and that has to be with your lead organization. And your organization needs an EIN. If you're not familiar with an EIN, it's a taxpayer number that helps avoid delays in payment and make sure that you don't have personal tax liability for this project. Some general considerations. You can still propose more than one grant, but make sure that each of them advance or address those strategic priorities, those 5 strategic priorities, and that a reasonable person would agree fits within one or more of those 7 legal authorities. Projects last just 1 year, January 1st, 2027 through December 31st, 2027. This year, the board is allowing strategic grants to propose the first of what might be a sequence of 1-year grants to achieve a single objective. But those would be 1-year grants, and future funding is not guaranteed. As noted, make sure that you're thinking about how to acknowledge the horse board support, make sure that you're following state rules, and that reimbursement basis is a real thing. Make sure that you are designing your project such that you're not left with a long delay between after you've paid for something and before your project has achieved its objectives. And so you can report on it and then I can reimburse you for it. So think about that as a design criteria. So the application process, let's talk about that. As noted, it's 2 stages. We're currently in the pre-proposal stage where we're seeking a wide amount of concepts that will then be narrowed down and invited for full proposals. And then those even fewer will be actually awarded. These are the 11 questions that are contained in the pre-proposal Google form. The first question is a multi-part question that asks you about your organizational information, including your partners. If you have partners, you need to identify which is the lead support agency. You'll be asked whether any of them have received prior horse industry board support. Your point of contact will ask a multi-part question about how to reach them. Who is that person and how to reach them? They must be with your lead organization. You then enter your title of project, maximum 15 words. Select which of the three grant mechanisms it is, strategic, grassroots, or event support. Note its project length. This is also a drop down. All grants, as noted, are 1 year, but strategic grants can choose to say that this is the first of a sequence of 1 year grants to achieve the idea or objective. Next, you have 500 characters or one or two sentences to describe your project. Be specific here. Think about what are you going to do with the money. Use your action verbs to talk about what will happen during the year. What will you do? Then we'll ask you to select which of the 7 authorities apply to your project and which of the 5 priorities apply to your project. Then you'll have another 500 characters to talk about what impact you expect your project to have on the priority that you've selected. How will you know that you've made a difference? If you find yourself using the same kind of information in both question 9 and question 6, that's a wasted opportunity. You'll want to be answering, those are different questions, and you're going to want to answer them differently to give yourself the best chance at being competitive. Question 10 is a simple number. What is the total budget that you request? And in question 11, we're asking you in another 500 characters to anticipate what you're going to spend that on. 500 characters is not much. We're intentional with that. Plan your words. The content in the box is about 500 characters, so you can see it's 2 short paragraphs. So my advice is to make sure that you've got an idea well in your mind, and make sure that you're using each of those 3 500 character boxes smartly. So here's the timeline. We're currently in to the left of this where it's open. You have from now until 17th of July at noon to complete those 11 questions in the Google form. You're welcome to ask me any questions, attend the July 6th webinar, reach out, work on your idea, submit multiple if you like. I will be remediating them, meaning reviewing to confirm eligibility and filter out any projects or project components that we cannot fund, for example, construction. Then the board members will review and score those pre-proposals. Board members that have potential conflict of interest will be recusing themselves from those projects following state legal guidelines. In the board's meeting on August 17th, pre-proposal scores will be ranked by average, and the board will discuss and vote. Then they will vote on which to invite. No later than 2 weeks later, but probably faster, I will reach out to you as an applicant to let you know whether you've been invited, whether the board had any feedback for you. If you were invited, you'll get a packet with full proposal instructions. If you happen to be proposing a strategic grant, then you may be asked to present at the board's meeting on October 26th. So as you prepare your pre-proposal, it's always a good idea to keep in mind how it will be evaluated. And there are 2 evaluation criteria that apply to every pre-proposal: impact on at least one of the priorities and the reasonability of your budget. Those of you thinking about event support grants, we're also going to be looking at how the event elevates Virginia and the Horse Industry Board. Looking further ahead, again, knowing what's coming allows you to inform your present. Looking further ahead, the full proposal evaluation criteria will be a little bit more sophisticated. You'll see that we add the project feasibility as another area that we're looking at. And we'll be adding more nuance and detail to what we're looking for in each of the 3 criteria. Don't plan on talking about this now. If you are invited to propose, more information will be available and another webinar will be set up for you at that time. But this is simply a preview so you can see what's likely to be coming. For those of you who are invited to submit full proposals, those will be due by October 12th at noon, again via a Google form. The remediation will also occur, and that remediation, you need to bring that in advance so that remediation can be complete by that date. As before, board members will review and score them, recusing as necessary. There is an October 26th meeting where some strategic proposals may be invited to present. And then in the November 16th board meeting, the board members will discuss the proposals, which will be ranked by average score, and they will vote on which to award. Shortly thereafter, and before Thanksgiving, applicants will learn their results. And those of you who were selected to receive awards will get your documents by the middle of December so that you can receive them, review them, and sign them in advance of the beginning of the period of performance, which will be January 1st. If you're wondering what that full proposal will look like, it will follow the evaluation criteria. No surprises, no punches pulled. We'll be including the specific questions in your evaluation packet. We'll be asking you to describe your project plan, including what are you going to do, who's going to do it, how are you mitigating your risks, how are you going to acknowledge the Horse Industry Board. We'll be asking you about your impact in more detail, including asking for some standardized performance measurements which apply to your project. These may vary by what kind of grant you are applying for. And then finally, we'll be asking for a detailed budget with descriptions of each expense. So even though you don't need to know that now, because I believe in being informed now, so we're going to tell you what those budget categories are now so that you can build your concept knowing what's an eligible expense. So these are eligible expenses. First, you can pay your employees for the time they spend working on your project. In the course of an 8-hour day, for example, if one of your employees works 6 hours on this project, then those 6 hours plus the fringe costs associated with those 6 hours are eligible for reimbursement. The other 2 hours that they spent on something else, not eligible for reimbursement. Overhead costs, not eligible for reimbursement. If you don't have employees or hire somebody or hire a consultant or an external party to do work for you, that cost is also an eligible expense. So consultants, people who are you brought on board like repair or other people doing work on this project who are not employees, those are eligible expenses. Travel is an eligible expense, but it must be compliant with General Service Administration and Virginia state guidelines. That can be quite complicated. Um, so if you're expecting to use travel as quite a large portion of it, let me know. We can work it out. But just be aware travel is reimbursable within guidelines. Materials and supplies are another category. These are items or consumables that are used in the project that cost less than $5,000 per unit. Examples include feed or pencils or award ribbons, other things that you generate for this project. And then other, which is a nice wide category. Anything else that you need to do to move your project forward that isn't included in one of the other categories. This is a wide category, but it can't include any of these things. There are things that are not allowed. So, what's not allowed? Entertainment expenses, gifts, not allowed. Construction and costs, as noted a few times already. Construction is not a permitted expense, um, including materials or supplies or renovation or restoration. None of that is eligible for this grant. Purchases of equipment are not eligible. Equipment is defined as items costing more than $5,000 with a useful life of more than 1 year. Those of you who picked up on that notice that that's almost the flip side definition of materials and supplies in the previous slide. So if your item is more than $5,000, it's equipment, and if it's less, it might be a material or a supply. If you do have an equipment that's required for your project, you cannot purchase it, but you can rent it for the purpose of the project. Other things that are not allowed, indirect costs, insurance costs, cancellation, alcohol, cash or gift cards, capital investment, lobbying, fundraising, fines or penalties, those sorts of things. So once you've made your proposal, and gotten your award, here is a preview of what implementation will look like. As noted, you'll get an award letter in December that will detail the grant terms and conditions. You'll share with me your Commonwealth of Virginia version of the W-9 so we can get that into the system and avoid delays in payment later. And then you'll return your award within 30 days of when I send you with a binding acceptance signature. And your period of performance starts the 1st of January and continues through the end. In the unlikely event that the state fails to appropriate or allocate sufficient funds, the Horse Board reserves the right to terminate, but we do not expect that to be the circumstance. Here's what the award letter looks like. It's about 4 pages. It's essentially the instruction manual for the grant. It includes the how we change the grant, how you get reimbursed for the grant, the reporting requirements. It also includes things like the prohibition on discrimination, the audit requirements, the termination process. It records the budget, the title, the point of contact, the period of performance, the reimbursement process, change process, reporting requirements, and the like. During implementation, you will be acknowledging the horse board support using a logo and a media kit that we will provide. The details will vary by your grant and the mechanism of the grant. You will be reporting using an online template that's custom to your project that will differ based on whether you're a strategic, grassroots, or event support mechanism. You'll also be providing invoices up to quarterly for reimbursement. Those invoices include an invoice from your organization to ours, with a backup organized clearly for each of your expenses and receipts showing a zero balance. I'll be reviewing that for compliance with what you've proposed, that you're in keeping with your reporting obligations and your acknowledgement obligations. And then 30 days after payment is in order, you'll get a check from the state. That concludes my prepared remarks. What are your questions?
My
Jennifer,
name is
oh, go
Will,
ahead.
and I have a question.
Yes, Lulu?
Um, our association does run January to December, but we run our banquet 2 months into the next year, our year-end banquet. So in that situation, we would not be eligible for a grant to help with any kind of awards or ribbons for our year-end project, because we have it in February of the fall of the year after. In other
S-
words, I couldn't apply for a grant for that banquet because it's not, if I apply and it ends in December, our banquet's the next year in February.
No, those are unrelated. So your operating year, your fiscal year, however you run it, is distinct from the board, our grant year. So you can apply for events that take the grant takes place starting in January and ending in this. We cannot reimburse you for any expenses before January 1st, assuming that you are awarded this grant. So you wouldn't want to buy any of the things that you use in your thing in December. You would have to buy those in January so that in February, when you have your event, that's a reimbursable expense.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So I can see in the chat that Sandra Thomas asked about prize money for a horse show. We are, as Emily noted, we are confirming that in fact a check is still a mechanism that can be used because it's got traceability. Cash as like greenbacks, Benjamins, not permitted. Gift cards not permitted because, as noted, they cannot be traced back to the recipient. We are confirming that checks remain a viable way to pay for awards. We will be posting the slides if we can. If not, I'll be sending these slides out to those of you who RSVP'd, and the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel.
Great.
What other questions do you have? All right, I will stop the recording and hang around in case there are folks who have questions they just didn't want recorded.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Emily Betts. How do you define event? Is that take place over one day, a series of days? Can it be over a summer season?
I think we haven't made that a particular definition, and so I think that we would be interested in how you think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Jennifer, Julia Hillegas. If we applied last year and were not awarded a grant, can we reach out to you and get some feedback as to why, so we
Absolutely.
can improve our
I might not
application?
have it. I tried to share with you what I had at the time. So I will happily tell you, I will happily have a one-on-one conversation about your grant and how it looked, but there might not be, I want to manage your expectation. There might not be like a secret gem that I just was
Sure.
waiting for the magic code word to give you.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time and attention, folks. Hopefully you are excited as we are and eager to get this in motion. I look forward to receiving your pre-proposals. Reach out if you have any questions, Julia and others, and I would be happy to share with you everything that we can.
Jennifer, I did have one question, Jessica Downey. I'm looking at the meeting notes from last year and looking at the different award sizes, and I see that they went, let's say, everywhere from $3,000 up to
The range was $1,000 to
a
$100,000.
100,000. Okay, I was going to say 100,000 on the top. Are you all
Yeah.
expecting to? I realized that last year was a bit of a pilot program, and as you said, a kind of a wide open expectations in that way. And I understand that your grassroots approach is that $5,000 cap. In terms of those other two buckets, are you anticipating making awards up to that $100,000 mark, or is there an
Yes.
expectation level associated with? Is there any? Could you just speak maybe a little bit more to what those bigger dollar awards were last year that were successful?
Um, so I don't want to necessarily draw a line to last year. But what I will say is that I think the board with their strategic grants, they definitely want big projects that move the needle. They're looking for like so if you have what you think is a big project, I would encourage you to go ahead and throw that in there. And likewise, event support, like if you have a project that or an event that you think can really raise the profile and it's going to cost money to do that, I think the board is willing to entertain those projects. So I think big. The worst they can tell you is no. Or
Sure.
and they can also at the pre-proposal stage give you feedback and say this is too big or focus it elsewhere, etc. But there's a reason that there's only a cap on the grassroots grant, and I expect that the board wants to make larger grants.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Hmm.
Jennifer, I do have another question again about the banquet. Um, we have to do our deposit for the uh, banquet hall itself um, with usually before December. And then we do buy our prizes in January for the February banquet. But if we pay that money in December for our for where we're going to hold our banquet, that would not be able to be applied for in 2027.
Correct. So
Okay.
that we can only reimburse expenses that take place within the grant's period of performance. So
As of
that's
January
January
1st.
1st to
Got it.
the end of the year. And so
Okay.
in your particular circumstance, that would mean that if you are awarded this grant, that December deposit would not be eligible for reimbursement. The January balance might, right? The
Okay.
catering costs might. You would have to justify how food is not an entertainment expense um, at the full proposal stage. But
Okay.
that can be done.
Okay. Very good. Good. Thank you.
You also just, Lulu, you might be able to get creative with whoever it is that you're working with for the banquet hall and find out if there's some other way that you might give them something that's a placeholder that they then don't actually cash in on
Sure.
until after January 1st, right? So you can something that they agree to that is your indicative of your intention to follow through.
Great idea. Yes.
If they're willing to
Yes.
work with you in that way.
We've worked with the same conference hall for a number of years, so they very well might be able to do something for us like that. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I did have one more follow-up question. Apologies for the extras. I'm looking at the LOI forms here or the pre-proposal forms, and I'm not seeing an area that lists matching funds, which I know are not required, but I know are encouraged. Is there a specific area where the reviewers are hoping to have that baked into? I recognize the brevity that you're looking for in the 500 words for those three sections. Is there a place that we should note matching dollars, and should we actually have a dollar amount for matching dollars at this stage?
That is a fantastic question. I think the two answers I'll give you are, well, three answers are. First is we aren't looking for that at the pre-proposal stage, although that's a great point. Um, so we have at the full proposal stage, we're definitely looking for that at each level of the budget. So that does show up in a big way at the full proposal stage. But the two things I'll suggest to you at the pre-proposal stage are if you've got a cost share, that might be something that you list under participating organizations, which is one of the questions under the multi-part question one, which is who are like what are the organizations? So there's a field there that you might be able to use. And then the third thing is find a way to say in question 11 that you expect cost share. You know, what percent cost share? Like again,
Okay.
you're going to be character limited, but that's a worthy thing to put in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Great question.
Thanks.
So I don't want to hold you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited that we've got so many questions and so much attention. And from the comments, it looks like we've provided some information and value. Like I said, I'm available. You have my contact information still on your screen. Please, excuse me, reach out and continue to ask questions that you think of after we're done here. And I look forward to talking with each of you and seeing your ideas.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for thinking about the horse board.
Much appreciated.
This was very helpful.
Don't
Thank you.
forget there's a second chance to do this too in July.
July 6th.
July 6th at 6. So
same slides.
if any of your friends missed out, tell them they've got another opportunity. And also,
Great.
as Jennifer said, these will be on our YouTube channel. So you can always go back and watch it again. I think we're
All
good,
right, so
Jen.
with that, I'm gonna bring this to a close. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and hopefully we'll talk again in the future.
Jennifer, do you want to stay on for a sec?
Is it just you and me?
It's just you and me. There's something called Read AI Meeting, which somebody started, and I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and log off and I'll give you a call.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Mhm.